In the dark places of the world, there are many bizarre and misunderstood creatures. But one stretches the imagination to its limit. The hammerhead shark. Face to face with a hammerhead, only one question springs to mind. Why? Why does this creature have such a peculiar head? What's it for? And where did it come from? Nature doesn't create monsters, or does it? Only now are we starting to get inside the head of this most mysterious of sharks. Surely the strangest of all sharks. Its appearance is truly alien, yet they're commonly found in tropical seas right across the world. Surprisingly, there are many different kinds of hammerhead in a variety of shapes and sizes, at least 8 different species. This is the great hammerhead, the giant of the family. At up to 20 feet long and weighing in excess of a ton, it's the most imposing of them all. The shape of its body confirms that this is a shark, but with a difference. Why are hammerheads so uniquely endowed? The journey to understand these peculiar sea creatures begins in a place far away across the oceans. The Hawaiian Islands are a magnet for sharks, drawing them in from all over the Pacific. And where you get sharks, you get a certain kind of marine biologist, fascinated by their mystery, drawn to danger.
I started off working with hammerhead sharks and thought that they were this ungainly, ugly, strange animal, and over the years have come to just admire it tremendously for its sophistication and maneuverability, and absolutely antithesis of being ungainly.
Kim Holland has been studying sharks in Hawaii for nearly 20 years.
When you're dealing with any large shark, you've got your hands full.
Kim started looking for a connection between their biology and shark attacks on people. By understanding their movements and feeding behavior, he hoped to learn what makes some sharks dangerous.
We have to study the adults by putting an identification tag on, so that if somebody else catches that fish, so here's fish number 27, it was tagged in Hawaii in December, and now we find it in Tahiti. Right here's the old tag, number 312.
With 2 decades of shark research, Kim is well aware of the risks.
Because they're such a big animal, yeah, you have to be careful and you have to take your time and get it right. What sex have we got here? Female. Okay, and the tape coming to you.
Turning sharks on their back is one of the tricks of Kim's trade. It puts them into a trance-like state. No one knows exactly why this happens, but it makes tagging and measuring an adult tiger shark possible.
Ready? Total is 213, 213. Okay, let's get the hook out of this guy. Send her on her way. 3.
The tiger sharks that Kim studies are one of the most dangerous sharks to people. These are powerful sharks. They can be just as long as the biggest hammerhead, but weigh twice as much. Like hammerheads, tiger sharks can be found throughout the tropics, but they have a very different personality. Tiger sharks will try to eat almost anything they can find. And around Hawaii, that includes baby hammerheads. Adult hammerheads have few natural enemies, but in an encounter with a tiger shark, even the biggest hammerhead will give way. But for shark biologists, size and strength aren't everything. During many years of research, it was the most enigmatic of Hawaii's sharks that really stirred Kim's imagination.
People are unaware quite how evolutionarily sophisticated hammerhead sharks are. Adults often feed on squid. Squid are these little jet fighters that dash all around. Can you imagine how maneuverable you have to be as a predator to be able to snag one of those in 3 dimensions? Hammerhead sharks can do that.
But how can they do that? With such a strange and seemingly clumsy head, the last thing you would expect them to be is an agile hunter. So where does that bizarre design come from? Clues are to be found by delving into the past, to a time before hammerheads existed. The first sharks appeared around 400 million years ago. They were probably quite like this 6-gilled shark, small, slender, and fish-like. From a simple fish design, many weird and wonderful shapes have developed. It's often said that sharks haven't changed for millions of years, but the truth is that the history of sharks has been one of constant experimentation. Not all of them are the classic torpedo shape of the most familiar members of the family. Some are camouflaged and designed for stealth and ambush. These two creatures appear worlds apart, yet are still members of the same family. Some, like this epaulet shark, have abandoned open water and taken to living where you couldn't imagine a shark could survive. Today, they are extremely varied in shape and form, from gigantic gentle beasts like the whale shark to curious elusive creatures barely recognizable as sharks at all. With their close relatives, the skates and rays, the number of species in the extended shark family is at least 1,000, and there may be more still to be discovered. The extraordinary megamouth shark had never been seen before 1976, and we still know almost nothing about how it lives. The hammerhead is a new arrival in the shark family. It's thought to have first appeared in the oceans a mere 40 million years ago. But nobody's really sure. There are precious few clues to the origins of the hammer. Sharks almost never leave behind fossils, the main source of evidence about an animal's past. Ancient fish with skeletons made of hard bone left behind a detailed record of their evolution. But shark skeletons are made of cartilage, so teeth and jaws are all that usually remain. This means there are few clues to the ancestry of hammerhead sharks. Biologists have always assumed that the hammers we see today grew gradually over millions of years, that the head of a typical streamlined shark grew wider, expanding by very tiny amounts each generation, until eventually, after millions of years, the hammerheads we know today appeared. But the latest genetic evidence has turned this theory upside down. Some scientists now think the hammer didn't appear gradually, that perhaps it was a freak mutation that happened almost overnight. To many biologists, this is heresy, the kind of idea that would have Darwin turning in his grave. Freaks of nature do occasionally appear, but they almost never survive. Creatures straight out of science fiction like this two-headed shark, doomed to an early death. But just occasionally, one of these mutants does survive, and a whole new species is born. Was the first hammerhead one of these one-in-a-million freaks? Could its hideously distorted head have opened up a whole new way of life? With the eyes so far out to the sides, it couldn't look forwards, so hunting using vision became impossible. It had to adapt or die. Moving to the ocean floor, it relied on other senses to find food, and became the specialist hunter we know today. It might sound like fantasy, but this theory could explain the strangeness of the hammer-shaped head. However they evolved, hammerheads have become one of the great success stories of the ocean. Today, they are one of the most common sharks in the world, and in a few places they assemble in staggering numbers. Hundreds of them cruise around rocky seamounts. Few other sharks form such vast schools. This is one of the great mysteries of the seas. Why do so many hammerheads gather all at once? Strangely, most of the sharks in these huge groups are females. We don't yet know why. In these schools, you can see the sharks signaling to one another with subtle changes in body posture and sudden flicks of the head. At least 9 different signals have been recorded, and there may be many more. Some are clearly warnings. With others, we can only guess at the meaning. The biggest, most aggressive females vie for the best position at the heart of the congregation. Because this is where males come in search of the most powerful females. Hammerhead mating is still shrouded in mystery. An event so rare, it's hardly ever been seen. Female sharks often bear battle scars. While mating, the males cling to their partners with their teeth. And in these warm tropical waters, wounds quickly become infected. But at these sea mounts, help is at hand. Around these rocks live cleaner fish. And when hammerheads approach, they rush in to feast on parasites and infected skin. This helps the wounds heal and keeps the adult sharks in fighting form. After nearly a year, these newly pregnant female sharks will be ready to give birth. But it will be far from here. This is Kaneohe Bay, on the Hawaiian island of Oahu. In the middle of the bay is a tiny speck of land called Coconut Island. Once a playground for the rich and famous, this tropical paradise is now home to the Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology and base for Kim Holland's shark research.
We're so fortunate here because our research lab is right in the middle of a bay, which is one of the pupping grounds, the birthplaces for baby hammerhead sharks, where we can go very easily right outside the door, catch some sharks, study them there in the open, or bring them back into captivity. So as far as a place to study hammerheads, there's no better place.
Kim's team have discovered that there are up to 10,000 juvenile hammerheads living in the waters surrounding the island. What makes this place such a good shark nursery? At first they wondered if the bay was rich in shark food. It turned out to be just the opposite.
These shark pups aren't very well fed. The food resources in the bay really aren't that good. In fact, the baby hammerheads lose weight after they're born, and then after they figure out how to feed, then they start to get heavy again. It seems that these nursery grounds really have an anti-predation role. The bays here, and all the bays that we know of around the world where these babies are born, are pretty murky pieces of water. It's probably to help them hide and prevent them from getting eaten.
Young hammerheads are an easy target for hungry adults, but in these waters they're safe. The way hammerheads reproduce is unusual. Unlike most fish, they give birth to live young. This bonnethead shark has come to a shallow mangrove to give birth. Of the 8 known species of hammerhead, the bonnethead has the smallest hammer. Inside the mother, the developing babies are nourished by a system similar to the placenta of mammals. The babies are born with their hammers angled back towards their bodies. This helps to ease their journey into the world. As they get older, the heads will grow outwards into the familiar T shape of the adults. But why should these sharks give birth to live young when nearly all fish are egg layers? A mermaid's purse. This is how many other sharks start life. It's the egg of a cat shark, a small deep water shark. Every few weeks it lays eggs and attaches them firmly to whatever it can find. It wrenches the primitive eggs from its body before abandoning them to develop on their own. Inside the mermaid's purse, the young cat shark begins to grow. Its tiny heart, one of the first organs to be recognizable. For weeks, it will be fed by the nutrient-rich yolk sac left behind by the mother shark. When it finally emerges, it is tiny and helpless. Only a few of them will survive. Hammerheads have the opposite strategy. When they're born, they're already 50 centimeters long and strong swimmers. They need to be. These waters are infested with dangerous predators, and the quicker these young hammerheads can fend for themselves, the more likely they are to survive. The huge concentration of hammerheads makes Kaneohe Bay a mecca for shark biologists. Stephen Kajiura is a Canadian scientist who's dedicated his life to understanding hammerheads.
I think I've been excited about sharks ever since I was a small child, 4 or 5 years old. I would love to watch nature documentaries, and anything with sharks in particular really piqued my interest.
That childhood fascination with sharks never left. And the one shark that really captured his imagination was the hammerhead.
People perceive hammerheads as very strange-looking sharks, especially with this unusual head shape. And of course, anything strange is treated with a certain amount of apprehension and distrust.
That fear has lain deep in the human psyche for thousands of years. A Roman poet wrote of hammerheads, the monstrous balanced fish of hideous shape, rounds jetting lands and doubles every cape. And this mistrust has never left. A 19th century explorer, Captain William Allen, recorded an encounter off the coast of West Africa.
We had an opportunity of seeing 2 of those hideous monsters of the deep, the hammer-headed shark, Zygena malleus, which, as we slowly moved along, followed us some time, to the dismay of the superstitious among the sailors. It is certainly one of the most singular and horrible-looking of fishes. The head is depressed, more or less truncated in front, on each side extending horizontally to some length, which gives it the hammer shape. The eyes are placed at the extremity of this curious formation, and as the animal in its zigzag movements slightly raises one side and depresses the other, the eye has a most revolting aspect.
He may have got the appearance right, but he was hard on the shark's character. Science has come a long way since then, and we are closer than ever to uncovering the truth about the shape of the head.
Hammerheads have such an unusual shape, and you can ask so many good evolutionary questions about this unusual structure. Why did this evolve? What's it good for? You know, what function, if any, does it serve? And the question is, when you look at the strange head, is there anything special in there? The answer is no, not really. It's very much like a typical sort of normal Carcharodon pointed snout shark that's just been taken and stretched off to the sides to create this very unusual sort of skull structure.
Because of the stretched out head, the shark's eyes are on the extreme ends of the hammer.
Whereas humans are very visually oriented, we have binocular vision. It's difficult for us to imagine how an organism like a hammerhead shark could get by with its eyes pointed off to the sides like this, and we automatically think that it must be at some sort of disadvantage compared to what we're accustomed to.
It's clear the hammerhead can't see straight ahead like other sharks. With this massive blind spot, it sees the world through peripheral vision. Its side-to-side movement may help fill in the gaps, but it's hardly what's expected of a top predator. Unlike hammerheads, great white sharks are visual hunters. They rely on their dark eyes just as much as their fearsome teeth. They spend much of the time swimming deep beneath the surface, keeping an eye out for movement far above. Often they're looking for seals. When they sense movement, they attack. They don't need to be subtle. They rely on good eyesight and brute force. Back out in Kaneohe Bay, Stephen is fishing for sharks.
Got a weight on here. Monofilament leader so the shark doesn't bite through it.
This bay is so full of sharks, even the most unorthodox methods seem to be effective.
You just back it up just a little bit so the line is just off the bottom. What that does is it prevents you from catching things like stingrays or crabs, which are right on the seafloor. Just a few centimeters off the bottom is all you need, and the sharks will still be able to get the bait in that way. You'll feel a very distinct tug on the line, and we use barbless hooks, which make it easy to pop the hook out of the mouth again with minimal trauma to the shark.
At the bottom of the bay, the young hammerheads work on their hunting skills. In these shallow waters, their skin turns dark. The only animals known to get suntans, apart from ourselves. When sharks are on the prowl, it pays to keep alert.
Okay, here we go. Okay, here we go. We got a bite. We're on. All right, come on, baby. Pulling up the little baby, hopefully hammerhead shark. Got to pull him up pretty quick. Here we go. Look at that. Look at that. Oh, beautiful. Arc around once and grab it by the collar peduncle. And also by the head here. The head makes a lovely little handhold. Into the tank. Hang on, baby. Hang on. Take the hook out. So right through there. There you go. Come on. Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. Look at that. That is a gorgeous shark. This is great. I've come thousands of kilometers just to work with these sharks, and it's just gorgeous. All right. Oh, beautiful. Look at that. Why? Why do they have a head that looks like this? Nothing else has a head that looks like this, you know. The distinct hammerhead shape that really gives it the appearance of some sort of strange organism that people are just unaccustomed to seeing. Let me just try and take the shark, flip it over. Oh, there you go. Just like that. Just like that. Okay, beautiful. All right. So here you've got the shark. There's a little juvenile scalped hammerhead shark. Very young, no more than maybe a couple months old. You can still see the umbilical wound here, just like a belly button on a human. The general body plan is just like an adult shark. You've still got the very strange head shape, and it's just that it's a much smaller version of the adult, and which makes it much easier to work with. You can hold a little baby hammerhead in your hand, and you certainly couldn't do that with a 3-meter adult shark. So you've got one eye on that side of the head, the other eye way off on the other side of the head. You can see the nictitating membrane coming up to protect it like that. And notice also, way out on the ends of the head, you have the nostrils here and over here. Notice also along the surface of the head here, you can see all these little pores. These are all the electrosensory pores that the shark is actually using to detect the electric fields of its prey items in the seawater.
All sharks have a sixth sense. The tiny pores underneath their chins allow them to detect the minute electric currents that all living creatures generate. These electric currents only travel a short distance through seawater, so sharks need to swim close to their prey to detect them. Anything hiding just under the surface makes an ideal target. Sharks can sense straight through the sand that covers their backs. With broad, sweeping rhythm, it moves over the seabed, looking for a telltale signal. Its prey is located, and the shark spins into attack. It's this precise moment that Stephen is interested in. What role does the hammer have at the moment of attack? Stephen set up an experiment to find out. A small but harmless electric current is sent through the water, and the shark's reaction is filmed for later analysis.
Notice the distinct turning behavior, biting at the dipole, passing 6 amps of current across the 1 centimeter gap. There, clearly biting at the electrode right there. It thinks it's some sort of prey item. Vigorous, repeated biting. And notice it's ignoring all the other targets, which are not active. Okay, now the other hammerhead is biting at it. And again, coming back again and again to what it thinks is a crab or a fish or something when it's actually getting a mouthful of electricity. Okay, all the electrodes are now turned off.
Stephen also tested another of the bay's inhabitants, a sandbar shark.
Here you have two sharks that are so similar. They live in similar habitats, they feed on similar prey items. They're very similar in many ways.
A hammerhead without the distinctive hammer would be just like a sandbar shark. By comparing the reactions of the two species to a burst of underwater electricity, Stephen hoped to discover what difference the hammer makes.
What you'll see is the shark, as it swims in, will make this distinct turn, this orientation toward the active electric field, come in and bite at it repeatedly as if it were a natural prey item. From this type of footage, we're able to analyze it on the computer and say, yes, we're able to measure the distance from the center of the dipole to the edge of the head and determine what the electric field intensity was when the shark initiated its turn. Now, both species, surprisingly, had about the same absolute sensitivity to electric fields. Both of them were able to detect in the range of billionths of a volt, nanovolts, which is minute, very minute. And so the idea that the hammerheads, maybe with their broad heads, being more sensitive is not really strongly supported, at least when it comes to these prey simulating electric fields. But because they have such a broad head like this, they're able to sweep a much greater area of the sea floor as they're searching for prey. Given two sharks of the same size, a hammerhead shark and a sandbar shark, both 60 centimeters in total length, the hammerhead would cover the equivalent of about 1 1/3 football fields of area per day. The sandbar shark, maybe about half a football field of area. So clearly the hammers are going to sample much more ground, going to have a much higher probability of finding prey than would a pointed snout shark.
So there's one clear advantage in having the hammer-shaped head. It's like a giant metal detector sweeping over the sea floor, searching out its prey. But locating hidden prey is only half the battle, and the scientists were equally amazed at the dexterity hammerheads show at the moment of attack.
They are most beautifully agile, maneuverable fishes, and it's in large part because of that head. That head, they can tweak it, they can alter the angle of attack, they can warp it, they follow their head around. And when you can compare their agility with that of a regular old cylindrical shark, they knock the socks off of a cylindrical shark.
Once it's received the telltale electrical signal, the hammerhead spins until the mouth is directly over its prey. Most sharks roll their bodies when they turn, but hammerheads have to stay perfectly level. The slightest miscalculation and they'd bang their heads on the sea floor. The hammer clearly helps these baby sharks as they hunt in the shallow waters of their birthplace. But adult hammerheads spend their lives in the open ocean, an entirely different landscape. How do their surprising heads help them to survive in this vast blue world? Working with big sharks out in the open ocean is extremely difficult. But by studying baby sharks, Stephen Kajiura hopes to carry on uncovering the secrets of this incredible animal.
At the end of the experiments, it's typical for us to actually take the sharks back into the bay where we caught them and release them. Just take her, throw her over the side here, make sure that she's all right, flip her right back up again, make sure that she's swimming okay, she's strong, and then let her go. Hopefully come back in another 20 years and deliver some pups of her own.
Trying to address the evolution of this head is such an interesting question, and there are so many questions which arise even as you answered the first one. Things like vision, we haven't studied that nearly enough detail. No one has looked at the lateral line system on hammerhead sharks to see if it's more extensively developed. We would also like to quantify the actual lift and drag generated by hammerheads with different head shapes. So certainly there's a lot more that needs to be done, and those are the directions we'll be taking in the future.
Halfway across the Pacific Ocean from Hawaii, off the coast of Costa Rica, lie the Cocos Islands. What appear as tiny dots of land above the water become significant landmarks below. These towering seamounts attract fish in their millions. Deep ocean currents are forced to the surface, bringing nutrients which feed the sprawling masses. This many fish can't go unnoticed for long. Thousands of tuna devour the smaller fish, and they draw in silky sharks from far out in the open ocean. Incredible numbers are driven here by their voracious appetite for tuna. Hammerheads also gather around the seamount in their hundreds. But despite the abundance of fish, they're not here for the food. For years, scientists have been at a loss to explain these mysterious congregations. Once again, the most peculiar of sharks challenge the minds of men. So what is it that brings these magnificent sharks here in such astonishing numbers?
There's all kinds of reasons for animals to be in a school or in an aggregation. For instance, we know that here in Kaneohe Bay is a nursery ground for the baby hammerheads. The big mothers come in, they have their pups, they leave and the pups stay behind. And those pups stay in tight little schools during the daytime in the murkiest part of the bay, hoping that nobody will discover them and eat them. And then at night, the school breaks up, and off they go to hunt by themselves, and then the next day they reform into these schools. It may well be that even as an adult hammerhead, after you've gone from the bay out into the blue water, that being with the gang is something which they grew up with, for want of a better word. Or, in the case of when we find them aggregated around a seamount, it may be more important to be a hammerhead at that seamount as a reference point, rather than to be with the rest of the hammerheads. They're just there for the same reason you are, not to be part of a school, but to be next to the seamount.
What is it about seamounts that's important to hammerheads? There might be a clue in the timing of their daily movements. At first light, numbers are at their lowest. Throughout the day, more and more sharks arrive until by mid-afternoon, their numbers have reached a peak. As night draws in, the hammerhead school starts to break up. Small groups of sharks begin to peel away, heading off into the darkness. Scientists were intrigued to find that many of the sharks appeared to follow the same paths each night. In the deep blue ocean in gathering darkness, they seem to have an extraordinary sense of direction. Could it be that their hammers have a role in navigating through this apparently featureless landscape?
Migration, especially in the ocean, I think is the great last frontier in marine biology. How do animals, whether you be a hammerhead shark or a tuna, find your way from this part of the ocean to that part of the ocean and back again? We think that hammerhead sharks use the Earth's magnetic field, and certain parts of the Earth are very obvious magnetically.
We know that the hammer acts as a receiver, picking up electrical impulses from living animals. Could it also pick up signals from the very Earth itself? Incredibly, the peculiar head of these sharks may be linked to the most elemental forces that shape the planet. Hawaii is a land born of fire. For millions of years, molten rock and lava have poured out of the center of the Earth and been deposited in the middle of the ocean. Eruption followed eruption as the continental plates moved apart and formed fiery chasms along the sea floor. Lava piled up, layer upon layer, thousands of meters high, until it emerged from the boiling sea. This rock has become Hawaii. From the air, the islands appear as tiny specks in a vast ocean, but they are merely the summits of a chain of mighty submerged mountains, vertical cones of solid lava. The foothills of these towering peaks extend many miles to the base of the Pacific. Deep under the water, the eruptions are still actively giving forth, the cold ocean causing the lava to solidify rapidly. To us, the newly laid sea floor looks like a pile of rubble, but to some sea creatures, it is garish, like a zebra skin carpet. The base of the ocean is divided into stripes, invisible to our eyes. Each stripe is magnetically aligned to either north or south. Every few thousand years, the Earth's magnetic field changes radically, and as the liquid rock pours out of the crust, these changes are etched in the magnetic crystals of the rock as it hardens. It is known that hammerheads can detect changes in magnetic fields using the electrical receptors in their heads. Some scientists believe that they use the magnetic patterns as maps to navigate along the sea floor. But if they're navigating using these natural maps, where are they going? What could the hammerheads be looking for? Like all parts of the ocean, seamounts have their own distinct magnetic signature. Perhaps hammerheads use these places as reference points for the start of their journeys. By following the lines and contours along the ocean floor, which the electrical pores in their heads can detect, the hammerheads can navigate towards their favorite feeding grounds. Here, in the darkness, they begin to feed on their favorite food, squid. Amazingly agile, fast and elusive, these squid present one of the ultimate challenges to the hammerhead. Now, all the hammerhead's enhanced senses are called into play at once, in the darkness. As juveniles, they learned their skills in the shallows of Kaneohe Bay. That was a mere rehearsal. To be able to catch squid at night is the mark of a sophisticated hunter. The hammerhead clearly deserves respect as a skillful and efficient predator. At crucial moments, it brings together all its powers and unusual senses, many of which it's almost impossible for us to imagine. It's a remarkable predator. But could it turn its well-honed senses on us? Should we fear these sharks when we get in the water? Although hammerheads are large sharks and very common, attacks have been surprisingly rare when compared with other sharks. The great white shark is responsible for more attacks on people than any other kind of shark. But why should this be? Great whites spend much of their time looking up at the surface for seals and other large prey, so they will often spot people and can mistake them for their normal food. It's the hunting strategy of great whites that makes them so much more dangerous to people. So where does that leave the hammerhead?
Hammerhead sharks don't have the bad rap that other sharks do, certainly compared with the sharks that have evolved to feed on marine mammals like seals and sea lions. This is not the world of the hammerhead. The hammerhead is a squid-eating, fish-eating, one bite at a time shark. Their teeth are made for grabbing things, not for ripping into them. So humans don't come into the hammerhead's worldview.
We used to fear these sharks through ignorance. These mysterious creatures of the deep still hold many more secrets. But the better we get to know them, the more we can marvel at their sophistication. The hammerhead's most remarkable feature turns out to be its greatest strength.